If you, A, have something that you've either people always come to you about or you've figured out or that you're just really passionate about, and B, people need it, there is 100% a way to make money at doing it. And it's just about taking that first step and seeing what's possible.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hello, and welcome back to another episode. Thank you for joining me again. I am really excited about today's episode with Erin Hatzikostas. It's awesome. But before we get into that, I wanted to answer another question that I received from a listener. And if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot them to me at goli@lessonsfromaquitter.com. I'm actually thinking about maybe doing a separate episode. I might bring on like a career coach and try to answer a bunch of questions that you guys might have in, these jumps, journeys. So go ahead and shoot me an email and I'll try to get an episode out separate. But because I've already received this and I wanted to timely respond, I'm going to respond to one more question. This question is from a first-year lawyer at a big law firm. And she says, I completely lucked out in terms of people and workload. The partners and associates are very nice, and I've only had a handful of late nights. In terms of big law jobs, I guess it doesn't get much better. The problem is that I have known since before law school that big law wasn't for me. I worked in firms in undergrad and I knew it wasn't a good fit, but I was too scared to turn down my offer because I had friends who couldn't get a job at all. After being here for a few months, I don't enjoy the work and I have no interest in doing the type of work that the senior associates or partners do. However, even though I know I don't want to be here long term, I'm confused as to why I feel so strongly about leaving when there's nothing quote unquote wrong with my work environment. I'm concerned that my reason for disliking this job is just that it's uncomfortable to be thrown into something completely different, especially when there's a big discrepancy between how good I was at law school and how bad I am at this job. I don't know if I'm miserable because I hate the feeling of not knowing what I'm doing, or because I actually just hate being a lawyer in general. I knew I wouldn't like big law, but now I'm scared that I'm going to give up a job with nice people and a fairly manageable schedule to try something else that ends up making me feel the same way. My question is, how do you know if your job is or isn't a good fit when you're not very good at your job? All right, I have so many thoughts about this. First, let's just deal initially with this whole imposter syndrome thing. You thinking you're just not very good at your job and that's why it's uncomfortable. Sure, everybody as a first-year lawyer has no idea what they're doing because law school doesn't actually prepare you to work as a lawyer. You have to stop putting that pressure on yourself. Everybody in your law firm knows that you don't know what you're doing. Like, they're used to working with first years every year. They understand that those lawyers, they have to learn on the job. And the problem is that we put so much pressure on ourselves because you've always excelled and you were good at school and you were good at law school. So you expected to come in here and just be completely good. And it's more in your mind that you're making this thing about how bad you are. So you've got to get over that. It'll take you as long as it takes you to learn. They know it. You're going to be fine. And that's more of a confidence thing that you have to keep telling yourself. So even if you stay, I really want you to work on this thing of thinking that you need to be 10 steps ahead of where you're at. You're perfectly fine. And I'm sure that you do great work. But for me, when I read this question, I don't think that's the actual issue, that you're not that good. A lot of us think that we have a unique circumstance, or it's our own fears are very specific to our case, but most of our fears fall within 3 or 4, 5, top fears that everybody has. And yours squarely falls into this. What if I leave something that's not that bad and then I don't know what the next thing, and what if the next thing is worse? Okay. So what you've said in your question is very clear that you knew big law wasn't for you from the beginning. And let me just go ahead and let you in on a little secret. That's because big law isn't for 99.9% of people, even people in big law. It's not satisfying work. I'm sorry for all the people that work in big law. And if you love it, you might be a unique person. But the reason that it's hard and the reason they compensate you so much to keep people in there is because it's not soul fulfilling work to work on like some obscure part of a contract for like a multinational company that's worth billions and billions of dollars. Like that's not something that you're going to like get super excited about in the morning. And so you're already saying you knew it wasn't for you. You went in because of this fear that like, you know, it's a coveted position. Your friends weren't getting jobs. And like, you know, we should all be so grateful that we, you know, have this opportunity. You're there. You don't like your work and you don't like what the senior associates or partners are doing. So you know you're not going to like, you know, the future job. What it comes down to, and this is everybody's fear when they are stuck in a position they hate, is, but I already know what this is like and I can handle this. What if I leave this and it's worse? Like I fail, I end up in debt, whatever it is. And that is the fear that keeps everyone stuck in everything. It's not just jobs, like relationships. We as like human beings are more comfortable in the known than the unknown. So we will stay in something that's known and yet we're miserable because the unknown is so scary. And that's really what it comes down to when I see this. I think it's pretty clear to me. I mean, you know, it's that you don't want to give up something that other people think you should be really grateful for because you're making a lot of money or, you know, you have a good gig and you don't know what the next thing is going to be. So my advice to you, though, would be, one, get really quiet. I've said this a lot before. You don't need other people's permission to like leave this. You don't need other people's validation. You don't need other people's like advice. You need to get really quiet, whether that's journaling, meditating, whatever, and really figure out at the core, what is it you want? Because you already know the answer. So it's like, if this isn't what you want and you really get to that place where you're like, you want something else, instead of spending a lot of time in this stuckness, in this anxiety, in this fear, start being proactive. You have a great situation in that you're at a job that you're not completely miserable and you can make it work. So that's great. So give yourself a timeline and say, I'm going to give myself the next 6 months or a year or whatever. And I'm going to spend the rest of my time outside of work figuring out what it is I want to do. I'm going to squirrel away some money so that I can, you know, whether it's paying off loans or have things set up for whatever you're going to end up doing because you don't know. And you're going to spend, you know, instead of watching Netflix or scrolling Instagram or whatever it is that we do, you know, on our off time, I'm going to get super focused on what my next move is going to be. And if that means, you know, something in law, if you still aren't sure whether, you know, maybe just big law is not for you, then take this time to reach out to every lawyer in every field that you possibly have interest in-house counsel, you know, private firms, like somebody like a solo firm owner, public interest lawyers, whatever it is. Set up coffee dates. Find out what they do. Find out if that's something that you would like doing. I mean, that in and of itself might lead you to a job that you'll end up wanting to jump for. And if that's not it, if you start doing that and you realize, law is not really for me right now, spend that time figuring out what it is you like. Like, what did you like before you went to law school? What did you like as a kid? What do you like doing on your spare time? What is out there that interests you that you can maybe parlay your experience into? Spend that time being more active, because I think what happens is we just sit with this like, oh, I don't like this. I hate what I'm doing, but I have no idea else what I would do. And like, that's not going to move the needle. So that would be my advice. I hope that helps. Like I said, if anybody else has a question, shoot it over my way. And with that, let's jump into the episode with Erin Hatzikostas. I'm so excited to have her on the show. Erin spent 22 years climbing the corporate ladder, and she climbed it all the way to the top. She was the CEO of PayFlex, which is a large healthcare financial company. By the time she left in 2018, she was managing over 1,000 employees and over $2 billion in financial assets. It is an incredible accomplishment. And right when things were really good, she decided to step away from the corporate world and go down a path less traveled to start her company, Be Authentic Inc. She is most regarded for her Midwestern-inspired, unpretentious, witty, authentic style of leadership, and she is using that to break the executive mold. She is using Be Authentic Inc. to help leaders of today be more authentic, diverse, balanced, and a bit unexpected. Her company is doing really cool things. You should check it out at www.beauthenticinc.com. I'll link to it in the show notes. But I think Erin has a lot of insight about how you walk away from something that seemingly seems perfect and go on to do something that is just calling you. So without further ado, let's jump in and talk to Erin. Hi, Erin. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Goalie. I have to tell you out of the gate, it's funny, we'll talk about how I left my corporate career, and my parents, I think, are still trying to figure out what happened. So I was thinking about it now that I can tell them that I'm on a podcast called Lessons from a Quitter. I'm sure they'll be really proud, right?
Yeah, just as proud as my parents are right now.
Exactly. No, it's awesome. Thanks for having me.
No problem. I'm so excited. Actually, I would love to kind of jump in. On this podcast, we do focus a lot on that transition and how you deal with a lot of the stuff that people deal with when they leave careers like that. So I really want to get into the meat of that. So why don't you just start off and let us know what your career looked like before you decided to leave? Like, I know that you were at the same company your entire career. Can you kind of tell us like what that career looked like over the 22 years?
Yeah, I mean, despite being at the same large company, it definitely took twists and turns. So, like most people, came out of college not really knowing what I wanted to do or thinking what I wanted to do. And actually, it really started when I dropped out of engineering, didn't know what I wanted to do in college, was still taking math classes just because I knew I could do them. And my roommate actually came home one day. She was a year older than me, and she was so excited. And she said to me, Erin, I found the career for you. She said, it's high pay, low stress. You just have to be good at math. And you're the only person I know that's good at math. It's called an actuary. So, I went to school in Western Michigan University. This was the time before the internet, of course. This was 1995, 96. So, I found some booklet probably in the library and looked up where actuaries were. And I was like, oh, a lot of them are out in Connecticut, which is obviously because the insurance industry was out here. So long story short, I sort of swindled my way into working for Aetna, which is a large health insurance company now owned by CVS. And became really quickly clear, though, that while it was a great entry point, I was in a program and they sort of rotated you around. About 2 months actually into my internship with Aetna, they had all of the interns do a Myers-Briggs, one of those personality things. And I'll never forget it. So we sort of recongregate after they tabulate the results. And they put it up on this big screen. And it was like a matrix, 4 quadrants. And I was all by myself. And I was like, something tells me this isn't necessarily aligned.
Right.
But the good news is, I always found those opportunities. It wasn't, like a dead end, like anybody, right? It was just about pivoting and, what did I like and what didn't I like? So, for example, I had one job in the rotation where I got to work with salespeople on the phone. And I was like, I really like talking to salespeople. And so took lots of twists and turns. The common thread that I think kind of defined my time at Aetna was that, just when I would get comfortable, Sam, it was almost masochistic. I would be like, the go-to person, and I could read an email in a flash and know what I was talking about. And then the big part of my brain would be like, I'm bored. And so, I would just constantly find new opportunities. I sort of settled into a role getting 50% uncomfortable. So, every time I took a new role, it was like, I didn't throw away all of my skill set, but I always wanted to do something that sort of made me feel 50% uncomfortable, whether it was the subject matter or, it was the types of things I would be working on. So then fast forward, it's a long, windy road. Lots of times when I took new roles, I didn't necessarily also take the promotion. I even stepped back, but eventually I found myself into a really good organization, a wholly owned subsidiary of Aetna called PayFlex. It was a newly acquired company. And actually, when I took the job, I had just left leading a team of about 35 people. Was looking for something new, and for many reasons decided to jump into PayFlex, mostly because I knew it had a great culture. I knew it was a growing industry, sort of the macro dynamics were in my favor. But I took a step back, really. I didn't have anybody working for me when I first joined. I went back to individual contributor. I was building a team, but I was, back to being a one-woman show.
Right.
And to me, that was one of the most common things that really propelled me, because if you get in the right place and you obviously work hard and do a good job, that environment just grows and breeds you, unlike if you were to just try to interview your way in. And so the story goes that after about 4 years, I was promoted several times, eventually to the COO role. And then in 2016, I was given the CEO title for the company, which, nobody would ever have hired me in for, right? interviewing off the streets, but I had, really proven my worth and my following. And yeah, so that's sort of the end of my corporate career, was running this company for close to 3 years.
I mean, that is incredible. And I think there's so much to get into. And I want to kind of get into that CEO position. But before we do, I mean, it seems though that you were very strategic throughout your career when you're saying you're taking either step backs or figuring out where you can grow and pushing yourself to be uncomfortable. Most people, I would say, aren't actually like that. I think they look for that comfort zone. And once they master something, they kind of live in that, are really fearful about even within the same type of career, jumping into something new. What kind of propelled you into that? Like, was it because you were looking to climb the corporate ladder, or was it more to keep yourself engaged? I mean, what trait do you think that you have that pushed you to wanting to challenge yourself all the time?
Yeah, I would say it's probably 75% nature, because like I said, it was always that, that subconscious part of my brain that I was trying to beat out of the way. Because, I would think, oh my gosh, why can't you just, even at the end, I turned a company around that was having a lot of challenges, and it was like, why can't you just stay and enjoy it now? Like, stuff's not breaking every day. Right. And this is good. I think part of it is just something in my wiring. Some of it was strategic. I like to say that I was always kind of playing the strategy for the next role. Even though I had a lot of strategy jobs where I do 3-year, 5-year strategic plans for the company, I never really did that for myself. It was more like the step ahead. So, for example, when I left a pretty big role in international, I was leading our strategy and business development, our first real international expansion abroad, and doing great things, but only leading a team of about 6 people. So as I thought about what was next, part of it, which it always first was driven, quite frankly, based on personal needs. I was trying to get pregnant, and, traveling overseas doesn't necessarily help with that. But part of it was, it would have kind of a list of things I needed to check off in the next role. And I knew in that next role, for example, I needed to show that I could lead a bigger team. So I was looking at roles where they were going to give me more than 10, 15 people to lead. So yeah, I mean, I think if you would have asked me, are you trying to sort of check off the list and be in a perfect position to run a company, I would never have said yes.
Right.
I just knew all along the way that I wanted to keep pushing myself, that I wanted to keep acquiring different skills. And it was really, I would say, a strategic play, kind of just one job at a time.
I love one thing that you said that I think is such an interesting kind of a shift in perspective from things that we've heard on the podcast before, is a lot of people beat themselves up when they get to a certain place and then, they want more, they want something else. And it's this, can't you ever be happy? Why? Maybe there's something within me. And I think we look at ourselves like there's something wrong with you that you will never be happy. And I love that what you were talking about, it could be looked in that way, or it could be looked at as like, I need more of a challenge, or I'm getting bored and I need to constantly try new things. And so, yeah, maybe you get to a position and, how are you going to know what that position is until you're there? And then maybe it's not a right fit for you. But did you have those doubts when you were there that I'm never going to find a position that I want to stay in?
Not so much. It was more of why can't I just be comfortable? I don't think I ever really doubted or, sort of thought I was wired totally improperly or could never be happy, because I really was happy in those roles. I think now that I've gotten a little bit further in my journey, I've recognized a lot of it's curiosity. I'll tell you a story. Even after I had announced my decision to step down from the CEO role, and again, things were going great. My career was at its best. So yeah, I was fighting that other voice really hard this time. So I had made the announcement maybe a couple months later, or maybe a month before I left. And we were actually up in Vermont. My kids have crazy schedules, as do most people. Son plays hockey, daughter plays basketball. I feel like we never can get away anymore. And it was one of those weekends we actually had games, and we were like, you know what? We're skipping them. We're going north. We have a place up there. We're going to go and just, have some family time. And the Sunday morning, I was going to go for a run, and my son wanted to ride his bike with me on this trail. And so he's 7. And so, we're riding and we're talking, and it was funny. He was getting tired. So we're like, let's head back. It was one of those things where, we'd go up a little bit of an incline, and he said, let's just ride to the next hill. Mm-hmm. Let's ride to the next hill, and then we'll turn back. I said, sounds great. I'd run, he'd ride. And then we'd get there, and he'd be like, let's just go, because you can see out in the distance, right? There's a little more of the hill, but then it ends. And we did that probably 6 or 7 times. I'm sure a lot of you, you've done that, right? When you're like, I'm just going to do one more hill on this run. And so we kept doing that. And all of a sudden it hit me. I was like, that's what I'm doing in my career. I mean, what was driving us to go to that next hill? It was curiosity. And we hadn't been on that part of the trail yet before. And so, we had seen this pretty waterfall. So there was always this like, but if we go a little bit further, maybe we'll actually see something even more beautiful, or we'll see something new. It was sort of this epiphany. It was actually something I wrote into my final note to my team was, that I finally realized this is it. It's like when you climb a mountain and you think you're at the top, like you're rarely at the top, right? You look around, it's all relative. And you're like, oh crap, there's another peak over there that's even higher.
Yeah.
I think inherent curiosity has also been a propeller. I tend to fear more not doing something and not figuring it out than being complacent.
Yeah. Well, I love that. And I think that is actually rare. I think more people fear, the risk and the loss and the failure than they do being complacent. And it's such a great attribute to have because it does push you to accomplish so much more. But going back to your CEO role, so you climb this corporate ladder for 22 years. You become a CEO of relatively very large companies. Like on your website that you have 1,000 employees and about $2 billion in financial assets. Like this is a huge company. In your early 40s as a woman in a CEO position, when you were making that decision, like what was it that you wanted to get out? Like, were you unhappy in the role? When did you start getting this inkling that like, I want to do my own thing?
Yeah, I mean, so the common thread with all of the times that I made a change, there was always 2 things. Family. Mm-hmm. So if I'm being honest, when my son started hockey a couple of years ago, and it's just so intense, and it was just like, oh my gosh, I can't keep running on both of these treadmills. I had never taken a break in my career. I had, 16 weeks of maternity leave for both, which we all know is not really a break.
Right.
So, I kind of had said, maybe I'll take a mid-career. So, part of it was definitely personal. That's always a factor. And then the second part is just, I had the itch. I had the itch to do something new. And, I was very open with several of what I would consider my sponsors at the company. I was thinking about what was next, and I wasn't sure that it was there. They were very gracious to talk to me about other jobs I could take, and I put a little bit of a full court press on just, different leaders trying to kind of pitch me for different roles. And, it's almost like when you try on, the wedding dress, they always say, like, you'll know, because there's just a feeling, right? It's not, until you stand there and you look at it. And, it gave me the chance to kind of feel these new wedding dresses, and it just didn't feel right. For example, when you become an executive, even if I move to a different role, different subject matter, different mechanics, a lot of what you do is the same, right? Like financial fire drills, obviously leading your team. And it just didn't feel different enough. So there was those 2 pillars. And then there was like a flood of like 16 other things that really propelled me to make the decision, like, this is the time. And I'll tell you, this sat in my head too. So it was actually when I was really first starting to think about what's next and was realizing it might not be there. And I was on a plane traveling somewhere. And, I don't typically strike up conversations, but I was sitting next to this really nice lady. And we started talking, and she did corporate America for a little while and then, got out and started her own HR consulting firm. She had a very small business and, she was talking about it. And I said, it's interesting. I'd love to hear more. I'm thinking, about leaving, and I'm thinking about maybe I'm going to start my own company. I'm not sure what it looks like. And I said to her, but my career is like, it's rising. Like, I don't know that this is the right time. Like, my quote unquote equity is really high. And she looked at me and she said, who says this is the top? I actually wrote her after I left, had connected on LinkedIn. And just that small statement, like, who says this has to be the top? And it made me realize that my view, my perception, my vantage point working in corporate America, working in the same company, the mountain peak, was being in sort of these high level roles there. And the world's big though. And you can define the top in so many different ways. And I tell you that one little statement stuck with me. I tell people all the time, you have no idea what you can say and influence people. And her comment really, really influenced me to say, you know what, you're right. Even if things are good here, who says that's the top?
Absolutely. It's so funny how even phrases or cliches that you've heard a million times, like at one moment in your life, you can hear it in such a different way and it like profoundly changes and provides clarity of like what you should be doing. So that's amazing. I think a lot of women in higher roles or in professional roles, or I would say any minority group, feel a certain level of pressure that like you are sort of carrying the torch for everybody, right? So you are a female CEO of a large company. Did you feel any of that kind of guilt, like with the Sheryl Sandberg lean-ins and taking over the stuff of taking kind of a step back to do your own thing? Did you have that pressure of like, oh, I got to kind of like do this charge for feminism and women and make sure women are in the C-suite and that kind of guilt?
I didn't. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I think it all really comes down to, who says that's going to be the top. Mm-hmm. So I found my way, my mindset. I mean, look, I felt guilty for leaving my team.
Right.
Absolutely. We were close. We'd built a great culture. I knew that they liked working for me and all of that. That I felt guilty. Carrying the torch, I actually feel like I'm carrying a much bigger torch now than I was carrying there. I'm now showing people, now that I've figured out what the heck I was going to do, that success can be defined in very different ways. And can I mark my stamp success yet? No, I've been in business 2 months, but I am already inspiring people to think about things differently because I did it when things were good. I didn't do it when, I had a package, right? Or my husband, we had to move because of his job. I did it propelling myself forward versus letting an external factor. So the women thing for me, I think we can be an example in so many, many ways, and it doesn't just have to be in that title. And I think in a way I left that legacy because I got there. And now I'm saying that's not even it necessarily.
No, I agree with you. And I think that is a self-imposed guilt that like we have to move away from because you're not a representative of everybody and it's your life and you have to do what serves you and your family. But I just hear so many people stuck in these roles because of what society has put on them. And so it's always interesting to me. I think that it's amazing to be able to come out from under that guilt and realize like you can do so much more. Like you were saying, and just be a role model in so many different ways. I really want to get into what you're doing now. But before we do, just last, like when you leave this kind of a role, I mean, did you have like negative reactions from family or friends or, coworkers? Kind of this, like, I think a lot of people get like, are you crazy? Like, why are you leaving this cushy job to try something that you have no idea, what's going to happen?
The biggest was sad for us, happy for you. So I think, that was sort of the thread. I, though, tell people I'm really good at leading sort of in work. I'm getting better at leading my children. I'm really crappy at leading my husband. I'm working on it. We had been aligned. He had been supportive of me taking a break because I didn't know what I was going to do right away. It was ill-defined and a little bit gray. I was not good. I said, I think, probably in the fall. And then I got realigned under a new boss in June. And I think it was our first one-on-one. He said, well, rumor has it that you might not be sticking around. And I'm just like transparent to a fault. So I was like, yeah. And then I'm like, how about October, whatever date? I can't always keep track of my conversations. So we were at a party, I think like that weekend at a friend's house. And I was telling a girlfriend, my last day is going to be October, whatever. And my husband looks at me and says, what? And I was like, oh crap, I forgot. I'm like, well, we said the fall. So he's been supportive. It was tough for him because there was so many like ebbs and flows to what the heck was I going to do? And we're in a really good place now. Now it's a little more tangible. It's not so black box anymore. Yeah. But, other than that fumble, and I joked about it, but my parents still trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing, but they're not alone, right? In sort of this world, it's a little ambiguous. But I would say overall, nobody, at least to my face, was too negative about it.
Yeah. Well, having gone through that, do you have any advice for people? I hear from a lot of people that, want to make a big change, but their spouse isn't on board or, there's a lot of conflict about how they're going to make it work. Having gone through that, is there any advice of like how to ease that process or maybe like how to talk to, your significant other about this like huge change?
Yeah. I mean, say I'm an expert. I would first get a coach. I mean, I have a coach, and that was the first thing we tackled, to be honest.
That's a good idea.
And the small things like getting past the fact that my actions don't control his mood. completely. It's not my responsibility, because there would be times where I would be like, oh, he's upset that I'm leaving, or that it's like, no, he feels like crap because he's got a cold, or,
Right.
Had a bad day at work. She coached me through, I think, some really good things. So I think, honestly, that was well worth my investment to really hold my hand through that. Another thing, which is really tactical, but I know I always like to hear kind of the practical advice. If you're starting your own business, you're going to have to invest. Whether you're making widgets and you got to buy parts, or, it's something sort of more in the coaching consulting type space, your legal fees,
Right.
marketing, things. And what happened at first was, I had some expenditures come across, and, kind of anything over, let's say $500, it sort of feels like you should be talking about that with your spouse. And so he was kind of involved in what he was spending. And so then I was holding back. And I finally decided, because we had savings and I obviously had contributed to that savings. I sat down in bed one night and said, look, here's how much I want to invest in the business to start out. I'd like to set that aside in my business bank account. Here's why. He said, okay. And that's been really huge, because you obviously want to be careful with your spending. You don't want to pull back on certain things because it won't make you successful. So I think that would be my second advice, is find a way to really just say, like, here's either the amount of time I want to take or the amount I want to invest. I've also talked to him about what are my goals for the amount of money I'm going to make this year. And it will be lopsided. It won't come in every 2 weeks. So just being really clear about that. And then I guess my last piece of advice would be every once in a while, show what's in it for them.
Right.
I was just telling my yoga friends today, a couple of weeks ago, my mom actually was visiting out of town, and we had the afternoon free before we had to pick up the kids. And I said, let's drive up. We have a bunch of breweries out here, but we have one that's really hard to get the beer at, and you have to drive like an hour. And my husband's a big IPA guy. And so we drove up, and I said, let's get some beer for Valentine's Day. And I figured it kind of also showed, like, oh, isn't it nice that on a Friday afternoon I could every once in a while do things like this, which I couldn't do when I was working in the corporate world. It's always nice to, give a little love in that way too.
I love that. That's great advice. Now tell us, like, what you're doing with Be Authentic Inc. Like, how did you come up with this idea of this business, and what do you do in it?
Yes. I guess a happy accident. When I was thinking about leaving, I had kind of different buckets of things that I thought I might want to do. So everything from, traditional strategic business consulting. I actually founded a small software company, which is sitting on the shelf right now, but, starting kind of more of a software kind of startup. So I had all these buckets. And one of the buckets, of course, was in the space of career and leadership development. I knew that was definitely my secret sauce. I mean, the things that we were able to accomplish around leadership and culture at our company, I think, were just amazing. And I think it's inherent in me. But I avoided it because I'm also somebody that absolutely hates to do normal. And so as I thought about, career and leadership, I thought about all these companies that are out there and sort of dime a dozen. So one, I didn't want to be another dime. And I also was worried that if I went down that space, I said, you know what, I'm a businesswoman though, too. I thrive on like the business stuff, and I might not get enough of that. But it was when I announced I was leaving, and the floods of emails and conversations that kept saying, we're going to miss your authentic leadership. You're real, you're human. I've never had any. It really made me pause. And it wasn't immediate after that. Then it was just a series of steps. So then I said, you know what I can do for people? I'll blog about my experience starting up this software company and consulting on the side, which was kind of where I was at that point. And I'll, talk about my experience, because I know we all are very curious. Like, what is it like? Website, set up a blog. And then, one thing led to another. And then one day I just had this epiphany, and I'm like, I can be in this space, and you know what? I can do it totally differently. I can do it in kind of the authentic, sassy way that I like to operate. I can, whether it's for everything from the brand or the types of programs. And I really got the passion, not only because of who I was, but I've been around a lot of executives. I've had a lot of bosses. There's still a lot of crap out there.
Right.
And they don't have to be. I really got propelled forward. And one of the things that also, I really felt strongly about is there are so many amazing women's leadership groups, and I've been a part of many of them. But what we often weren't talking about in any of those groups was ourselves as a barrier, just as much as the outside forces. And if I can instill in people that you can be yourself, you can be authentic, you can not sell your soul and compromise your family and do the job in a new way instead of changing yourself to do the job. For me, this is almost, I call it, authenticity transcends gender, advantage women. So this is sort of also a little bit of my backdoor way to push and shove women forward without excluding men, very sincerely. But if I can enable an army that sort of reinvents and rewrites how executives act and take on their jobs, then I think more women will stop saying no and will step up and we'll get to a great place.
Yeah, I love that. I think that there clearly is like a cultural shift towards being more authentic and creating more just pleasant work environments and kind of going away from the traditional rules that we've had in the corporate structure. I love you're kind of on the forefront of that. I really like what you said about like doing it your way, because I think so many times, so many people stop themselves from doing something because they think like, oh, that's such a saturated market, or there's already so many coaches or whatever it may be. But there's just room for everybody to do it the way that they want to do it. Like no one's going to do it like you, and you'll find your people that resonate with that. And some people may not, and they resonate with a different person. And so I love that. I think as like an overarching advice for anybody that kind of feels like they can't because there's too many people doing that.
Yeah. And I think you're right on. So that applied to me as I was starting this business. And I say the same thing in sort of the corporate world. I said no twice to two different big jobs. Now, both of those roles, I ended up acquiescing and saying yes. But I said no because I looked at the people before me and I thought, I don't want to be on the plane as much as they are. I don't want to have to be holed away in a boring office, whatever it was I saw. And it wasn't that they were doing it wrong. What I want to really show people, like nobody does it perfectly, right? And so the things that I maybe wasn't as strong as when I took my CEO position, I didn't go on the road as much as maybe I should have. I was picky about it, is what I like to say. Or maybe I didn't have as many dinners, sort of networking, my company with another. But those things that I didn't have, I also brought other things to the table. So my relatability to people, the ability to get them pumped up and inspired. And so really recognizing that you're never going to bring everything to the table. And let's say you're looking at a big job that some other, and it could be a dude, it could be a woman. And we see it all the time, like, oh, but they don't have any kids, or, their kids are out of school, or they have, the ability to kind of do it their own way. Trust me, you can bring your own value and do the job in a different way than they did and be just as successful. So I really think it's such a common theme, whether it's, you're traditional or it's out doing business, everybody has something new. And you're right, you'll attract your people.
Such a great point. I think we focus so much on what we lack or where we're like our faults are, instead of looking at where you have unique strengths and like what you bring to the table. And I think that's absolutely the truth. So what do your programs look like? Do you work with individuals or do you work with like companies?
Yeah, my focus, if you look on the website, it says both, but my focus really is direct to consumer right now.
Oh, cool.
What I'm working on first is just creating trust. So I blog every week. I've got a Friday Instagram live I do every Friday, 8:45. I've got I've got a podcast club, which I'll be sure to highlight yours. So every week I highlight a new podcast episode that I loved. And then on my website, we have all the podcasts because they honestly have been like my secret weapon to growth over the last year and a half. So right now it's really about building that brand, that trust. I am building up those programs. I'm actually going to be launching my own podcast in April with a friend.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm working on an online digital course. One of the things that'll release in June. My mission really is to affect 1 million people. And once I hit 1 million, I don't want to stop there. But, my door used to revolve constantly, especially the last year or so when I was in the corporate world. And it still does. People, a lot of women, not just asking me, like, how did you get where you did? But how did you get where you did and not compromise your family, your young children, and, continue to be yourself? And so I'm really hoping to be able to bring that to more people through this digital course. It'll be, part videos, but it'll be a lot of simple practicing items and homework and an online community that will hopefully, take the things that seems like I learned quickly, but Lord knows I stumbled and fumbled. And, there were certain things that I learned so late in my career. I'm like, crap. If I would have, for example, learned to ask more thoughtful questions back when I was in my 20s, it would have been amazing. Why, when I'm 40, do I finally realize the power of a question, So things like that, some things I figured out quickly. Some things it was like, oh my freaking God, Erin, like, you're a nightmare. How did you just start, really realizing you should be doing X, Y, Z? So I'll be bringing those types of courses. My hope is I would consider it some credible experience with all of my years and the input that I've gotten. If I can go out and help millions of people really, the right people actually soar in their career, the people that are not just willing to fake it or work harder, but the greatest people, if I can help propel them forward and learn from them, which I know I will learn way more than they do, right? What their fears are, what their challenges are. I really hope in a couple of years, even stronger, to be able to go back to corporations who will be, they're going to be it's going to be the trenches. The talent wars continue to be just incredible. And then I hope to be able to serve them even better because I will now have the voices of millions so that they can really understand what they're looking for and what they need to do to change to attract the right people.
That sounds incredible. I can't wait to see what you do with it. And I love that you have such a clear vision for not just like right now, but what you want to do with it in the future. I know it's going to be amazing. Do you have any final advice for anybody that kind of feels stuck in a career that they either feel like they're stalled or they don't love and they're just fearful of like getting off that mountain to try to climb another one? Any parting words?
Yeah, I have always said a couple things. It's just one step at a time. And back to your earlier point, like super cliche, you don't have to look at me and be like, she crazy. Like, I can't do what she did. Like, you don't have to be, quite so abrupt. I talked a lot this week, actually, in the things I did about, how we get addicted to our salary but we save for like houses and renovations and new cars and new clothes. And, I really recommend, thinking about investing in yourself too and exploring, even while you're working, whether it's taking an online class or course or going to a conference or, just exploring something new. Every time, crazy, and you probably know this, Goli, but when I started this, I'm like, I don't even know how I'm going to do a website. I don't know how this works, how that. And it's like every curtain you open, like all of a sudden you're like, oh, yeah, that's how you do it. Whether it's technology that's out there or the business model you could use to make money at something you love to do, the curtains keep opening. And quite frankly, sometimes it's helpful. Like I have to say, like we always joke, like, Facebook has too much information or Instagram and they're targeting. It's freaking awesome when you start to figure out what you want to do. Yeah. And next thing you know, you're like, oh, I just had 10 people basically come to me and say, oh, you're interested in that? I can teach you how to do that. And you have to wade through some of the noise. But if you just, whether it's starting to listen to a new podcast or, taking a class or start searching stuff, the curtains will keep opening. And if you, have something that you've either people always come to you about or you've figured out or that you're just really passionate about, and B, people need it, there is 100% a way to make money at doing it. And it's just about taking that first step and seeing what's possible.
I could not agree more. I feel like I sound like a broken record. It's always like, just take action, just start one step after another, and it will lead you down that road. Thank you so much, Erin. This was wonderful, so informative, and I'm sure it's going to help a ton of people. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, Goli, thank you so much. And I listened to your episode, I think a couple episodes ago, and you're looking for suggestions on how to go out and get no's. I can't remember what it was called, right?
Yeah, the rejection therapy, yes.
Rejection therapy. I thought of something either for yourself or for friends.
Yeah.
Try to either negotiate their doctor's bills or, let's say that they're trying to get a refund for something that they didn't. I have so many friends that are so scared of that. I'm like, what's the worst thing that could happen?
That's a great one.
So that could be a way where you could help your friend. Like, is there anything that you're trying to fight, customer service or something about, or, reduce their bill? I think it's a good one for you.
Oh, that's a great one. I'll definitely try that. Perfect. Thank you so much, Erin.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much.
No problem. So many takeaways from this episode. I can't really narrow it down, but here are my top 3. 1, I loved when Erin said, who said this is the top? So many of us are so fixated on what we could potentially lose that we don't realize like what we're giving up. We want to stay safe. And with that is an opportunity cost, right? You're giving up some kind of opportunity. And sometimes just shifting that view and not realizing like what you could possibly go wrong, but like what are you giving up by not taking that risk? Who said this is the top? Maybe there's something so much bigger for you. I think it's a great mental shift and it helped me when I wanted to leave. And I love that she found that helpful as well. 2, I really want to highlight that there is nothing wrong with you if you are not happy in your current situation, or if you get to another place and you realize that's not for you either, or you want more. So often we beat ourselves up for like, why can I never be happy? Nothing's going to make me happy. And I love how she didn't do that to herself. She got to a position and realized, okay, I'm bored, or like she realizes about herself that she's curious and she wants to move on. And she took those leaps. And we evolve in everything. You're not the same person at 20 that you are at 30 or 40 or 50. Hopefully, you're evolving. And it's okay to have your wants and needs evolve, and that's going to be the same for your workplace. And 3, I would say there is room for you to do it your way. So many of us get stopped by this, it's overly saturated, or there's too many people doing it. It's like, there are 7 billion people in this world. You can find a market to serve. You don't need everybody else's clients. You don't need, it doesn't matter that someone else down the street has a restaurant. There still is room for more restaurants, So figure out what it is you want to do and know that you can do it your own way. And with that, I will see you on the next episode. Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter, and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.